And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This is Lovely Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. And if it's Saturday at this time at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we all come around and talk about Africa because Africa is dear to our hearts. We've been doing this, we've been going at this for so many years. And the question is, we've come to a situation where we feel Africa should be better than this. That's where we come here every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to share our thoughts and our beliefs where Africa is concerned. And today, we have a very special guest. Yes, a very special guest who's going to share his thoughts, his experiences with us. And it's no other person than the editor himself, my brother from another mother, Abayomi Azikiwe. Folks, the name Azikiwe itself sends certain powers inside of me because it connotes greatness. We've had so many patriots from Africa, and when the roll call comes up to be mentioned, Nnamdi Azikiwe's name comes up, Kwame Nkrumah's name comes up, Kaunde's name comes up, Obote's name comes up. The names of the great patriots, no matter what the Western media or the Western financial or whatever societal institutions may deem them as pariahs, we loved them, we still love them, and we wish that they were here, continuing with the struggle that we as a people have gone through. And today, I have with me Abayomi Azikiwe. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
It's a pleasure having you to have a conversation with you as we normally do. We don't have an interview on this station, we have conversations. So, having said that, could you please tell the listeners who are around the globe, so many stations, so many people are listening to us right now, who Abayomi Azikiwe is, please. The floor is yours.
Okay, you broke up a little bit. Could you repeat the question?
Oh, I apologize. I would like you to introduce yourself to the listeners around the globe who may not know you, but we know you, and a whole lot of us know you. But to those of the other people who may now come to know you, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation. And I'm involved in gathering information and disseminating information on Africa and people of African descent all around the world. We have been doing a lot of things for centuries. If you look back at the struggles that took place on the African continent prior to the era of slavery and colonialism, where you had consolidation of various African cultures and nation states, we were on a path of development. And then, of course, we had the intervention as people like Shino says, when things fall apart, that's is to, in fact, bring about a reawakening and a reacquaintance, with our own history and culture. And we see this taking place in many different avenues. For example, in popular culture, you had the film The Woman King, which addresses the historic role of African women in the struggle against enslavement and colonialism. You had Black Panther, which the first part was filmed in Southern Africa, in Lesotho, in the mountains. So these are efforts, even in popular culture, to reacquaint ourselves, with our own history. So I think this is what I am trying to do. And I've been trying to do it now for a number of decades, whether it was in the university setting, in the community settings, in terms of what is going on now in regard to the metaverse. We have to actually bring about the reawakening that we need.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for the intro. The topic that we're handling today is that more often than not, what we say is that Africa has been endowed. Somebody told me the other time that God loved or loves Africa so much so that He's given us everything. Everything from the sun, from the moon, the stars, everything. Human resources, natural resources, and yet we see the continent as it is today. What is your take on that? Because we should have been ahead, but right now we don't see it. Because I'm saying this to say that back home in Africa where I grew up, I quite remember traditionally, the elders will tell you on certain days of the week, you don't go to the farm, you don't go to the bush, you don't swim, you don't cut trees, you don't dig. There were so many facets of traditional structures. And when we grew up, we came to the realization, we started asking ourselves as to why all these traditional stuff? Why can't I do this? Why can't I even, when I'm taking a shower, sing? Why can't I even sweep after 6 p.m. or in the dark? We didn't understand it until we grew up. So the whole thing was that they were protecting the environment, they were protecting the forest, they were protecting so many things that made them survive as a people. But today it's not like that. What do you think has happened to us right now? Because right now it's like everybody is doing everything. We are not preserving it. We are rather destroying rather than reconstructing and maintaining the sustainability towards our development. Your take on it, please.
Yes, I think that's a very good question. And it brought to mind what has happened over the centuries. I keep going back to our historical context because we were ahead prior to the 14th and the 15th century when we had this violent intervention from Europe. And the center of the world economic system was what is today considered the Indian Ocean Basin, meaning, the area east of Africa, the waterways extending through North Africa, the Horn of Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa. Of course, that is not the case now, but what we see are people who are advocating for various forms of unity, which can bring about a new economic and political order. And of course, we have to consider that even today, there are many forces internationally that are against the advancement and development of the African continent, as well as African people throughout the world. I live in the United States. Just this week, last week, the Supreme Court said that there was no obligation to admit African Americans, anyone of African descent, anyone of Latin American descent, Native American descent into elite universities in the United States. There's no obligation. And these are advances and reforms that were won over the decades. People like Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who were all, influenced by what was going on in Africa. For example, people like Nkrumah and many others, Nelson Mandela. So there's an actual war being waged, against our people, all over the world. We saw what happened in France last week. We see what is going on in Africa, where the United States Congress is questioning the ability of African Union states to conduct their own foreign policy. They want to punish them for having normalized relations with Russia or with China. So the war continues, And I think it's something that we really have to be concerned about all over the world.
Yeah, we are welcoming Dr. Francis Mpindo to the program, a stalwart of the program. Dr. Mpindo, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Brother Theo. Um, it's good to see you, and it's good to see our brother uh, Abayomi Azikiwe.
Thank you.
Did I pronounce that well, or do I
Yeah,
need
that's good.
education? Because I don't want to assume.
No.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we are delighted that you have joined us today, and I'm sorry I was running late, and I just caught the tail end of your comments there, which are very insightful, actually. And you know what? When we have people like you in a program of this caliber, it's something we don't take for granted. So thank you, sir, and thank you for making time to be with us.
Good to
One of
have
the
this dialogue.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, you know what? I usually think of the three Ds, right? We dialogue to discover things that will help us to decide. And so just listening to what you said, I mean it's getting my engine all fired up. And I usually say, don't get me started, but I
Stand.
think you just got me started here, my brother.
Go ahead.
And the thing that comes to my mind, Brother Azikiwe, is yeah, you made reference to giants like Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King, and all these people who have been part of the journey to bringing us to where we are. As someone said, we've been sitting on the shoulders of giants, so we are able to see beyond. So the question for you, my brother, in light of all this, obviously we're delving into Africa being able to develop and depending on her own natural resources and work toward our own development. Is are maybe I should say are maybe I should put it in a form of another question. Should we say that values and core values, cultural, economic, are they taught? Are they caught? Because what you made reference to here, here's a nation that was built on the backs of, and I'm referring to the United States here, built on the backs of Africans and African Americans. And now there's this shift, which I believe is a response to something that has been happening. You see, we can never legislate human behavior and attitudes. So there was an underlying current there that did not really embrace this commitment to diversity and equity and sharing resources, and knowing that we have African Americans and other people of other countries of origin who are marginalized. So something has happened. Somebody has said, hey, we used to believe that, but not anymore. That used to be a core value, it's not. So how do we deal with these core values changing? Even in Africa, there was a time we used to sit at the feet of the elders when they are speaking. You would not say a word. But now young people look up and say, what did you say? No, that doesn't make sense. No. I think no, I don't even understand you because what you're saying doesn't make sense, right? So things are shifting. How do we deal with this, my brother? I know I'm probably asking a loaded question here, a roundabout way, but take it away from there. What's
These
cooking
are
in your
important
mind in
issues,
response to this? Yes, sir.
very important questions, because you look at a country like Senegal, for example, in West Africa, a former French colony, where it appears to be the majority of the population are young people under 30 years old. They just had an uprising recently. And I think what's underlying this is that these young people need jobs, they need economic opportunities. They need, the availability of education. And it's going to be a very explosive situation on the continent because the majority of the population now are young people. And this is why the West is so concerned about what direction Africa is going in, because what we see happening, for example, with stuff like the BRICS summit, which now represents about 44% of the population in the world, and 19 other countries want to join BRICS, including countries like Mexico, which is just south of the United States, where I am, and they're going to have to deal with this. The people who have been hoarding the resources of the world for decades. They're saying they have a right to do this, yet the populations, the demands, the imperatives of the majority of the people in the world, that's people in Africa, people in Latin America, and the Caribbean, people in Asia, in the Asia Pacific region, they are the overwhelming majority right now. And we see examples being set in various geopolitical regions around the world. So I think it's going to come to a head very soon in regard to what position the United States is going to take, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and all of these difficulties. Now they want Africa to support the war in Ukraine against Russia. They want Africa to turn against China. They want Africa to become closer to the United States and Europe and the European and the United Kingdom. But what do these states actually have to offer at this point to the emerging African economies, particularly if the majority of the population are youth? These are some of the questions that we have to address very, very soon.
I hear you. I hear you. And I think one of the sad things is that we have these, I know some people like to refer to them as developed countries. I don't particularly like that term because I think we are all developing, and we
Yes.
we develop at different paces. And your development compared to mine, you might look at me and say, he's not developed, but you have no idea where I came from. And I feel that I'm very developed. So we may never, yeah, I think it's one of those, we can never agree to disagree. But I kind of feel like the US and Britain and some of the European countries, they like to impose themselves on other people, which is very unfortunate. And I actually look at that as a continuation of colonial mentality that says, we understand your situation and we understand your problem. And here is the best way you're going to resolve your issues. And if you don't do it this way, you've already intimated to this, they are going to punish you for not embracing their own values and their own ways of doing things. Let's face it, I am one of those people, and I know Brother Theo is like this too. We know we live in a world where there are differences and we can never eliminate them. In fact, differences are not points of contentions, but opportunities for us to discover what makes us different and how can we collaborate and make things work for the betterment of our future. But when I look at my differences, when I look at my own preferences and my own ways of looking at things as the norm, as something that is non-negotiable for everybody else, we fall into deep, deep difficulties. And this is what I find, that their own values, okay, say for example, we have gender issues and we have, you know, yeah, gender issues and, sexual orientations and all that. People have a right to choose what they want. I don't think anybody can impose on that. But you don't have the right, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own truth. If you have something you value, don't impose it on other people. If African nations saying, listen, this is how we look at life, and this is what we do, and this is how we observe it. Yes, we are against you know, discrimination and, violating other people and bullying other people. We need to respect each other and treat one another with dignity. But you don't come around and say, if you don't do this, then we're going to punish you as a nation for not doing ABCD. So all what I'm saying right now, brother Azikiwe, is things are being imposed on us. It's not going to go anywhere. They've been doing this for years. For years. We have giants like, Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere. We have, Jomo Kenyatta, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. We have, you know, um, Dr. Nkrumah. We have, I mean, all these people who have stood up and said, we have core values. Even Kagame, we have core values. You don't tell us. You don't assess our values from your own perspective. But how do we come to this place where we are viewed as uh, equal partners at the negotiation table, and you're not looking at us as small boys who need to be schooled? Because we went to school. I know you're an educated man. Our brother Theo here is an educated man, and we've been to their schools, learned through their own cognitive processes, and they have emerged. And now we are speaking in this language that unites us. Because, I don't speak Igbo, I don't speak, Yoruba, I don't speak, you know, um, all these other different languages across Africa, but we have a language that unites us. So through that language, we're able to say, no, you cannot push us around. So how do we come to the table, my brother, and become a voice without people looking at us as small boys who don't know what to believe? And so we need to be told, if you don't believe this, I'm going to take this away from you. So how do we deal with this?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's the issue of self determination. In many things they advocate internationally that they don't practice inside the country. So they may talk about, discrimination against gender orientation overseas. But then we saw in the Supreme Court what happened earlier this week, where they actually said that private businesses do not have to serve anyone that they don't want to. I mean, give me a break. This is completely hypocritical. Yet you want to tell people in Africa, people in the Caribbean, what they should be doing. Yeah, there's so many contradictions in this country. Yeah, and you look at the violence here, the interpersonal violence, for example. Every day there's some mass shooting somewhere in the United States. What is at the root of this? Obviously, there's some kind of malaise, in the national consciousness of the country. So, this is what the African heads of state and parliaments need to discuss, is that they need to look clearly at what's going on in the United States and then evaluate U.S. policy towards the African Union states, towards the civil society organizations, which they try to manipulate in Africa. And they do the same thing here. They try to win people over to their positions, utilizing money, privilege, exposure in the media, and so forth. But I think it's going to take a lot more on our part to really counter what is going on right now, because I believe, these Western countries are very desperate right now to maintain their hegemony. And, we have to take that into consideration in all settings, in all platforms.
I hear you, my brother. Hey, listen, welcome everybody. This is Love by Afrobeat music talk radio show, and we come live every week And I know that we do have a listenership that is very, very global. And this day, we are delighted to have our brother Abayomi Azikiwe, all the way from, as those in Canada, our brother Theo would say, our cousins south of the border. Um, but
Yeah, and
often, yeah, oftentimes they look at it the other way and say, no, 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 no. You know, we are the big cousins with the little brothers up on the
right,
northern side of the border. So we are
exactly.
really delighted that you're all joining us this morning. Brother Theo, what are some of the things that have been cooking in your mind just in response to the insightful comments that our brother is sharing here?
I wholeheartedly agree with him. It seems as if the clock is turning back. Because Brother Azikiwe alluded to the point of the Senegalese youth uprising. You have to create certain conditions. It's not restricted to Senegal alone. Kenya too. The young people are also, getting up. In Ghana, they are coming up with policies to maintain the conservative kind of aspects of our upbringing by coming up with the most stringent LGBTQ laws. We've seen what has happened in Uganda, where the Ugandan government said, no, we are not going to accept it because this is un-African. And the United States government came out and said, no, if you do that, your speaker is going to be sanctioned, everybody is going to be sanctioned and stuff like that. I think, looking at it from where I sit, I think African countries are beginning to realize the fact that, the game is not going to be played all over again like we used to. Brother Azikiwe, what do you think is actually going on? Because if you hear the speeches by the Kenyan president, William Ruto, he's become more outspoken than the rest of them. The young ones, of course, when you talk about Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Central African Republic, this is what we don't hear about. Because there's some revolution kind of going on in Africa. What do you think would be the outcome? Because you said we have to be very cognizant of the fact that the Western so-called empires are becoming desperate. And if you're a desperate person, does desperate things. And
Yeah.
What is your take on it, please?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Every year at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City, many of the African leaders come and they deliver speeches. And I listen very closely to the speeches they deliver. And for example, you've listened to the speech that was delivered by the Malian foreign minister last year. Heavily anti-French, anti-West, and they're controlled by military government. We see what's happening in Burkina Faso, where people are calling for Russian military advisors to come in to help them against the Islamic insurgencies. This is really an interesting period that we live in. And the fact that many of the African countries are still dependent on the United States for trade, for all types of assistance, they have refused to go along with the United States position in Ukraine in regard to their war against the Russian Federation. President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, came here last fall, and he demanded a meeting with the congressional leaders that are calling for a bill to sanction African countries if they have trade relations with the Russian Federation. And that bill has not gotten out of Congress. And I think his intervention was very important in this regard. So it's a very, very important, even an inflection point, because despite all the contradictions that exist within these governments and societies, talking about the corruption, the lack of democracy, and so forth, I think from the grassroots, from the young people, the farmers, the workers, the unemployed youth, the intellectuals, I think it's coming with such a force that the governments even have to at least make it appear as if they're standing up to the United States, standing up to France. And what can the French say? I mean, last week, there were rebellions all over France that were triggered by the police killing of a 17-year-old youngster who has Algerian and Moroccan roots. There are millions of them from all over Africa that live in Paris, live in other areas of Marseille, Lyon. A lot of them live outside the city in the suburbs, and they're heavily oppressed. They're harassed by the police. They're denied employment. They're denied economic opportunities. At the same time, they want to attack these young people and their parents when they rise up in rebellion against such a provocation. So, yeah, I think the African countries see this, and more they're speaking out about these contradictions that exist in the West.
And do you think the leaders we have today, apart from these young ones that are upcoming who are standing up, do you think the leaders are ready to confront the situation where we are in? Because, like I said, desperate people do desperate things. And with respect to our economic stability and where Africa has been and where Africa is going, where now it's not like it used to be, where people like I live in Canada, it used to be like, oh, that's a Jamaican Canadian, or that's an African Canadian. That kind of mindset, that kind of indoctrination is gradually dying down because we see ourselves as facing the same kind of enemy, if I can use it loosely like that way. We see the same kind of situation that we're facing. How do we then nurture the youth, preserve the youth to take over when we're gone? Because if they are not there, if we don't protect them to protect what we are going to leave behind, there's going to be a very big problem for us. Because right now, like Dr. Mpimbo said, the value system is gradually being broken down with respect to the youth. How then can we, from where you sit, can we sort of bring our heads together to realize the fact that, hey, we are in a war, a state of war, where even at the United Nations, a continent of 1.3 billion people doesn't have a seat at the United Nations Security Council, and we demand it. We are not asking for it anymore. We demand it. Other than that, we say enough of it. How do you then, sort of from where you sit, advise us or give us your opinion as to how we can nurture these kind of the youth to be able to be focused on the struggle, where we're going, analytically speaking?
Well, there's no justification for the. Oh, hello. How are you?
Good.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to say briefly that there's no justification for the African Union not to have a permanent seat on the Security Council. You're talking about 1.3 billion people that supplies a lot of the resources that the world needs for the current technological and industrial system. It's no justification for it. It has to be the West, because the Russian Federation says it's in favor of Africa having a permanent seat. The People's Republic of China say they're in favor of it. So it has to be the U.S., Britain, France, and Germany that are blocking Africa from having a permanent seat on the Security Council.
Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right, Brother Azikiwe, because someone has decided from way back when what to do with the continent of Africa, which is very, very unfortunate. I mean, it dates back to 1800s when they took the map and pretty much drew lines and decided, okay, I'm going to take this one. Okay, what do you guys think? Oh, okay, we'll take this, and they just drew and dividing people. And so now we look at ourselves, and when you look at our African Union, what they stand for and what they should stand for, sometimes you wonder whether we're really standing up for ourselves or whether we're basically promoting the kinds of ideas and philosophies that somebody has imposed on us. And I think that's a conversation for another time. But Brother Earl, it's nice to have you with us, and thanks for joining us. And we'll give you a few minutes to regroup yourself, and then we will invite you to share. Brother Theo, you mentioned something that is uh, very, very important. And I think as long as we don't dwell on who I think we've reached a place now we should not be asking for permission. We should get to a place where we say, listen, who I am is not defined by you. I know who I am, and this is what I stand for, and these are my belief systems. As a result, I don't need to apologize for coming from Africa. I don't need to apologize for not having a seat. I need to stand up and simply say, and I think this is something that our heads of governments need to embrace. And I really mean that with all respect for our leaders. They need to get to a place where they actually say, and I'm actually glad, and our brother Theo has already mentioned this. We have people like, um, you know, Hichilema, Zambia, we have Kenya in Ruto, we have Kagame, we have guys who are saying, listen, the days of inviting us and parading us and taking pictures and you don't hear from us, you're not even interested in what we're going to say, are over. We're not going to be burning. And this is what has been happening over the years. Our leaders have been flying all over the place at the invitation of these countries, but in the end, nothing happens. Nothing is being done to advance who we are. And as a result, it just becomes, a photo shoot and parade them and say they went over here. And who is paying for all that? Our own African countries are paying for that. And many of them, they even go with entourages that are so big that, even though I like what some of them have started doing. Listen, we have an embassy over there. Whoever goes, they're going to stay at the embassy. You don't go in these big hotels and spend money we don't have to impress people. We're not going to do that. We're not going to load up a plane load of people and have taxpayers who are struggling to make ends meet pay for these big bills for you to go and attend all these summits and stuff like that. So it's a new dispensation. There's a new way of thinking that is emerging, and we are glad, and we want to see more of that. Now, Brother Earl, uh, what comes to your mind in the light of some of the comments our brother Azikiwe has highlighted?
Good morning, distinguished panel. You know, I'm listening. I was listening on the radio, and I just couldn't wait to get in here because the brother made it clear. Stop sitting down. Stop sitting down. Stop waiting for someone to give you or pass a cup of coffee. Stop. See, right now, all we do, I don't care who you are, red, yellow, black, and white, if you're not in the power of manufacturing, if you're not in charge of ownership, all you're doing is receiving a cup of lukewarm coffee where the milk and the cream is put in. But then you don't like coffee, but you can't get anything else until they open the door. When I was listening to, I pray I say your name correctly. I'm gonna say it like this. I'm gonna try. Azikiwe, Akiwe. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, Azikiwe, yeah.
Azikiwe. When he was talking about the U.S.
Yeah, go ahead.
And as you were talking about the U.S., and I'm a firm believer. I'm gonna say this first. I want everybody to understand. I'm a Christian first. I'm a God-fearing person first. So if what I believe is contrary to what God says, I need to stand on it. And when you were talking about the gayism, the sin. I'm gonna say it like this: if God says it's sin, and I'm gonna tell you like this, in my life is one thing, but I don't control what other people do. You can't tell somebody they have to accept something. Here in the United States of America, we're the land of the free, as they say, home of the brave, we've heard. But when people say we are a Christian nation, we need to get that clarified. Because as you were talking, you can't, if you're a Christian nation, you cannot go and tell someone else to accept something that is contrary to their beliefs. And here we are, we're promoting what? In a way, it's genocide. It's genocide. Some people say, well, genocide is to eliminate people. Well, when you start telling people what they have to accept in order for them to receive help from you, you're killing a people. You're destroying their natural resources, which is themselves. And that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm hearing right now. The destruction of a natural resource of a people who have moral values, and at the same time they have the raw product. They have the raw product, but they can't get in because they have not come together to understand power is all about unity. And if you are united, you can tell anyone with power, go take a flying walk off the shore pier. I was going to say something else, but the bottom line is, brother Azikiwe, you are hitting the nail on the head. And if the U.S. and all these other big time, big chest, big puffed up countries, if David could beat Goliath, I'm going to use two, then Ghana can knock down some of these big names in resources. Look, Ivory Coast have resources that are used all around the world. But you see, unity. See, when you take away the strength of these countries, and all I'm going to say is this, and I'm going to jump off. Coffee, cocoa. Don't let it get cold. Take that cocoa out of these states, and you got a ride on your hand. Don't let it get during the holidays, it's Christmas, and the New Year's. You take that cocoa bean out of these United States, you got a fight on your hand. But I'm going to give you the biggest. You take that chocolate away from women, when they say they need that chocolate, y'all know what I'm talking about. Oh, you talking about going to pull down some strongholds. And that's all I'm saying. The bottom line is, if we begin to focus on the power, we have the resources. We need to come together with the resources. If our countries, if the African countries on the west part of Africa, northwest, with those few resources, they could bring down several major countries and tell them, we do our thing, you do your thing. But if you want our product, then you have to understand, don't put your foot on our land to control. Back to you, Brother Francis, Dr. Francis. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Hey, Brother Earl, it's always nice to have you on the on the air here in this program, because you are an analytical thinker. And I think when I look at my brothers here with me, Brother Theo and even Brother Azikiwe, we have learned to process things. And I think when we find ourselves in such contexts, we have the freedom to reflect, put our ideas together, and articulate them. And that's one of the most powerful gifts that God has given us, the mind, and being able to think, even using languages that have been imposed on us, and we are working from the inside going out and saying, let's go beyond what has happened to us, because what has happened to us does not define us. Who I am is not defined by what somebody says about me. You can call me all kinds of things, but that's not going to make me me, because I know who I am. And I think the more we have brothers and sisters on the continent looking at ourselves from that perspective of the core values that are African. Now, do we mean to say that everything in Africa is perfect? No. Is everything in the US perfect? No. Europe? No. Culture is created by human beings as we try to understand our own contexts. And whatever core values we have embraced over the years did not happen overnight. And we will continue to borrow ideas from others so that we look at things from our own perspective, even though we borrow from other people. You made reference to the rebellions that have happened in France. And I think one of the things I was talking to our brother Theo about is we need to find a way to bring in different African nations so that we dialogue around policing in Africa. Yes, the West have their own issues when it comes to policing, which dates back to colonization and all that whole process. But we have to define our own. We picked up some dysfunctional techniques of policing that we thought were the real deal, only to discover that it doesn't work for us. You see, intimidation, beating people up, scaring people and making people nervous, that's not community policing. Policing shouldn't be that. These are people who should serve and protect. And when we hear of people being shot by the police, you're saying to yourself, okay, what was happening? What was happening for a police officer to do stuff like that on a young boy? What happened? I mean, we don't have the answers now. I wish one of these days we'll be able to bring someone from France who would be able to say, okay, this is what happened. I mean, there are issues that we cannot settle in one conversation, but I think our brother Theo is taking notes here because we need to look at these different categories so that we can invite different people so that we have dialogues. Now, I liked what you said about let's stop sitting down, and our brother Abayomi has already been talking about that. We cannot continue to sit down. We need to stand up without seeking permission. Now, I know that we do have quite a wide listenership, and one of the things we want to be doing is as people listen in to either make their comments or ask questions so that we can incorporate those as we move along. Brother Theo, I wonder if there's a comment that we've received, anything at this point, because I know sometimes we do, but other times we don't. Is there anyone who has made a comment or said something at this point?
Yes, somebody wants to ask Brother Azikiwe how he views the African Union in this whole kind of struggle that we're going through.
All right.
Yeah, it's a two-line struggle. On the one hand, you see positive things being done by the African Union. They at least established a framework for an African continental free trade area. They have taken a position in support of the Palestinians against the settler colonialism in Israel. But at the same time, there are other elements that are trying to undermine those positions. So it's a coalition of 55 governments. 54 are independent. One, the Western Sahara, is still under the control of the Kingdom of Morocco. So you're going to have different opinions. But I think you have to look at it from that angle. Like you said earlier, it's everything that goes on the continent is not positive. So But I think there are positive things that are going on within the AU. They have tried to maintain a semblance of independence as it relates to themselves, their relations with the United States, the EU, the UK, vis-a-vis, their relations with Russia, Iran, China, India, Brazil. Most African countries consider themselves to be non-aligned countries, meaning that they are seeking a independent path, from the traditional divisions that have existed on a world scale. People like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Gamal Abdel Nasser, they were co-founders of the non-aligned movement in 1960, 1961. So this has a 60 plus year tradition. This is nothing new in regard to what the U.S. is saying. They're accusing many African countries, particularly South Africa, of supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine. They went as far, this is the ambassador to the Republic of South Africa from the United States, accused the South African government of selling arms to the Russian Federation to use in Ukraine. South Africa has denied this. But let's say even if they did, they're an independent sovereign country. The United States is sending weapons to Ukraine. Billions of dollars of weapons, food, and other assistance. They're sending their own people to train
you.
Because when you send in these weapons, you have to train people how to use them. You just can't say it's their war that's being waged against the Russian Federation, because they see Russia as being a threat in Europe. They see Russia as a threat in Africa. They see China being a threat in Africa and worldwide. China has the second largest economy now in the world, when 75 years ago, they were even poorer than people in Africa under colonialism. They were under British colonialism. So they don't want these countries to develop, particularly develop independent of the United States and the West.
I just want to jump in. I want to jump right and ride that train because I have a question that was texted over to me. We have listeners listening in. I tell you, it gets sort of ruthless. The stuff that is being said right now, some people will say it's ruthless. And the reason why, just as you were saying, nobody wants anybody to do what? Advance, develop, to take over. Because now you have competition, or do you have an adversary? That is the question. Competition or an adversary? And I'm going to share this. This is from Pastor Willie Jones from Atlanta. When you were talking about the African people and the countries coming together, his statement is, self-worth is a mindset. How do you look at yourself and define your self-worth? So if everybody's defining their self-worth as independent, we fall short of the word unity. Yet you're all on that same continent. You're all bringing in people to come and get your product, but you're not getting fair market value. Because what you think is fair market value for let's say, I'm just using the countries, we're not picking on anybody, but let's say Ghana is getting fair market value. Now let's say the Ivory Coast is getting fair market value. Everybody's getting a fair market value, but what market are you talking about? Is it your markets? It's fair market value, or is it international market? This is our self-worth. What is the self-worth? And too often, just as you were talking about the war, here you have people talking. I'm hearing people over here in the States, and I'm going to say it like this: Black, Negro, African American, Latin, and everything else. When you read your history, it tells you quite a bit about economics. History tells you about economics. You were speaking earlier about how they divvied up the countries. Who divvied up the countries? Did you? Did we? Somebody came in and told us what was going to be. And as you were saying, they just sip the coffee. Right now, we're still sipping the coffee because until somebody put their foot down, until some country goes and start talking about invading Africa, Africa will never come together. But you see, nobody wants to go and invade Africa because why should we invade what's already divided? There's no unity there. We can go through the front door, the back door, the side door. All we have to do is raise the price here and lower the price there. Basic economics. We're doing that today. Think about what I'm saying right now. We're doing it today. If you're here in the States, I can't say for Canada, but I'm going to give you the short. Here in the States, if you know anything about the States, let's go down to the southern states where you have a large Mississippi is a state predominantly Black. Why is it that the people who are in office are white? We don't vote for our economic values because we don't understand it. We do not understand the economy. If you have 55% of the people in your state voting, and then you have them on the same with a Democratic Party, and you have the other race with that Democratic Party, right? You should automatically win. But when you don't get up and go vote, you're still sipping that coffee because somebody, your mindset says, well, they're not going to let us win anyway. Already defeated. Back over to you, sir.
Brother Earl, we appreciate that. Our brother has to go. Actually, I realize that we're actually coming to the end of our time here, and I wish we had a lot more time. But I'd like to give our brother Abayomi Azikiwe just a few minutes. Actually, we don't have a few minutes anymore. Just
We can.
a few seconds. We can give you, yeah. But I would like to ask you. We know that you have other commitments, and so do all of us. But we want to honor your time and give you an opportunity to say a few parting words. Listen, you will be back, and that's not a threat; it's a promise. We want you to come back. So over to you, my brother.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the invitation. We love Afrobeat music. Fela Analapu, Kuti, Tony Allen, all of those people. We love them. And thank you so much and this is a very important discussion, and we look forward to participating in the future.
That's good to know, my brother. Listen, we did not even do justice to the topic, so we know where to find you. We'll be knocking on your door, and our brother Theo will be in touch so that we can have a follow-up. Again, we're glad that everybody is here. Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk radio show. Every week we go live and we invite people. And if you know somebody who is a resource, and I mean that. There are people who have something to say, and then there are people who feel they have to say something. And so we're not bringing people who feel they have to say something. We're bringing people who have something to say. And we know that there are brothers and sisters out there who listen in every week, and we count it a real privilege. And so I'm going to ask our brother Earl as well if you have some comments you would like to share in closing, and then I'll go to brother Theo shortly after that.
My brother Theo, don't fall out the chair. I just want to say thank you, guys. Nice meeting you. I hope to see you soon, brother Zawiki.
So are you in Atlanta, Earl?
No, I'm not, but my Pastor Jones is.
Oh, okay.
He's my cousin, and we have a radio talk show that we'll talk about later. But is it okay if I say what it is, Theo? Our talk show is the Get Right Church Kitchen Table Conversation, where there's no holds barred. So the bottom line, I just want to say thank you guys. I look forward to getting you guys, all three of you guys, to come down on our show in the States. See, we need somebody punching. Okay, we need somebody throwing some body blows. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you guys very much.
That's good to know. Thanks, Brother Earl. Over to you, Brother Theo. Any closing comments?
Oh, yes. I'm so happy that Like any time we come here to have discussion, it's a conversation. It's not an interview. And as a matter of fact, I've learned a lot about the discussions that we've had today. And we hope to bring my brother Azikiwe back because you know what? He's a very busy man. And I've been following his career. I've been following everything that he does on CNN and all the other platforms. Yes, I love you. Keep on doing what you're doing to explain what Africa is. There's nothing wrong with Africa. Like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said, there's nothing wrong with Africa. But rather, Africans are suffering. And then we need to be able to get around it and make it better. Because he said the black man is capable of making mistakes and correcting them. We've made mistakes, yeah, of course. Our fingers are not the same, but it comes from one hand and we cannot cut it. And my mother will always say that if your baby does his or her thing on your lap, you don't cut your feet, you wipe it up and then move forward. So I would like to thank you on behalf of the management and staff of Love the Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. I mean, this is your station. Please come back again because Africa needs you. Africa needs everybody out there to come and say what we have to say because enough is enough. And until then, I hand it back to you, Dr. Bino.
Thank you very much, Brother Theo. It's always nice to have you on the team. I mean, you do a lot of work behind the scenes there to make sure that we are live streaming and connecting with the people around the world. And of course, today we are missing some of our regular faithful panelists, Miss Cynthia Chirinda, our brother JD. All the way from Accra, and of course, our brother Dr. Diallo. You mentioned Senegal. I'm hoping that he went back to Senegal to straighten things up because we really, really need to work together. You mentioned unity. Without unity, we cannot go very far. And unfortunately, many of the powers that have studied us have actually come to the conclusion that as long as they divide us, nothing is going to happen. And I know all of you have already made reference to this. We need to work together as a team. We need to be our brothers and sisters keepers and ensure that we are making progress because whatever affects you affects me because we are intricately connected in this journey of life. And we're grateful that God has allowed us to see another day. We've never seen it before. Let's do the best we can to make a difference and be the change, be the voice that we want to see in the world. And again, on behalf of Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio Show, with our brother Theo in the background there, we thank you, everybody, and brother Abayomi Azikiwe. Thank you so much for making time to be with us. And brother Sorrow, it's good to have you. And we'll take your invitation to come down that part of the world, our cousins south of the border, and we will see where we go from there. And actually, somebody I heard, I was talking to a brother in Milwaukee, and he said, actually, when we look at Milwaukee and some of the states, you know, south of the United States, we are like southern Canada. And I said, you got that right. Though, of course, they like to flip things and say, no, we are the little cousins up north. But again, thank you everybody for making time to be with us today, and enjoy your weekend and keep up the good work. Let's keep on keeping on doing the right things. Thank you. Adios.
Adios.